Jason Statham quietly walked into his own restaurant and froze in his tracks. What he heard wasn't the sound of sizzling steaks or clinking glasses. It was a waitress, crying in silence after being humiliated by her manager. And what Jason discovered next. It exposed a level of cruelty no one had dared to speak about. If you believe in standing up for those who can't, hit that subscribe button now. Because this story is not about Hollywood or fame. It's about courage, justice, and one man who refused to stay silent. Jason Statham wasn't looking for attention that night. He didn't wear the sleek tailored suits or the tough guy smirk the world had come to expect. Just a plain black hoodie, faded jeans, and a quiet presence that slipped through the city unnoticed. That's exactly how he wanted it. The restaurant stood quietly in the heart of Los Angeles. Statham's, as the locals called it, a high-end bistro known for its clean design, ambient lighting, and impeccable service. But for Jason, it was never about the brand or the glamour. This place was built from scratch with love, grit, and respect for the people who made it run. That's why he came back unannounced every few months. No red carpet, no whispers, no security detail. Just Jason, blending in, paying attention. It was nearly 9 p.m. on a Saturday. The restaurant was packed. The air hummed with conversation, laughter, and the sharp clink of silverware on porcelain. Couples leaned into candlelight, servers flowed between tables like dancers, and the scent of grilled rosemary chicken floated through the air. At a glance, it was perfect. But Jason had been around long enough to know that perfection was often a performance. He moved quietly past the front entrance, giving a nod to the hostess, who didn't recognize him under the hoodie. He liked it that way, anonymous, alert, watching the small things, a nervous smile from a server, a forced laugh from the bartender, the subtle things that numbers on spreadsheets could never reveal. He sat at the far end of the bar, nodding politely to the bartender, a young man named Cole. Jason remembered hiring him. Quiet, quick with orders, respectful. Cole smiled and handed him a menu, not knowing the man before him was the owner. Jason didn't open it. Instead, he let his senses adjust. His eyes scanned the room. Everything looked fine, until it didn't. From the far corner near the kitchen, he heard it. Faint at first. A small, muffled sound almost hidden beneath the restaurant's symphony of clinks and chatter. Crying. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was the kind of crying someone does when they don't want to be heard, when they're holding everything in, just barely. Jason's posture shifted. He rose quietly and moved toward the hallway that led to the back of the house. He passed the restrooms, the wine cellar door, then paused near the staff break room. The door was cracked open just an inch. That's all he needed. Inside, a young woman sat on a bench, back hunched, hands pressed against her face. Her dark brown hair was tied up messily, and her uniform, his restaurant's uniform, was stained and wrinkled. Her shoulders shook in silence. On the floor beside her was a crumpled apron and a server's notepad. Jason stepped back slightly, out of view. He didn't know her name. She looked new, but something about the way she trembled, it wasn't exhaustion, it wasn't just stress. It was something deeper. Fear. He didn't interrupt. Not yet. Instead, he returned to his seat at the bar, ordered a water, and watched. Moments later, she emerged from the hallway. Her eyes were red, but she held her head high. She walked with mechanical precision, as if moving too slowly might make her unravel. She disappeared into the dining area. Then another figure followed. The manager, Rick Camden. Tall, broad-shouldered, always impeccably dressed. A man who carried himself like he owned the place, even though he didn't. Jason remembered hiring him under probation. His resume was flawless, his references glowing. But something in his eyes had always felt calculated. Rick scanned the room like a hawk. His smile never reached his eyes. His walk was too precise, his presence just a little too heavy. Jason watched him stop near the bar, greet a couple of guests, and then lean toward the hostess to whisper something. She laughed nervously, too nervously. Jason turned back to his glass. He gripped it tightly, the cold sweat of the water soaking into his skin. Something was happening here. Something wrong. But he couldn't just storm in as Jason Statham and demand answers. That wasn't how change worked. Not in real life. He needed to see it, hear it, feel it. So he waited. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Samantha, the girl from the break room, approached a table nearby. She smiled at the guests, took their order, and walked away. Her smile cracked the moment she turned her back. She looked like she wanted to disappear. Rick followed. He didn't touch her, didn't yell, but his mouth moved. Sharp, fast, controlled. Jason couldn't hear the words, but he could read the body language. Samantha flinched. She nodded quickly. Then she walked off toward the kitchen with her head low. Jason stood up. He moved casually, crossing the floor like any other customer. He passed a family finishing dessert, a couple celebrating an anniversary, a solo diner reading a book. He kept walking until he was close enough to the staff station near the kitchen. That's when he heard it. Rick's voice. Quiet but venomous. "People like you should be grateful to even be hired here." Jason stopped mid-step. His heartbeat surged. That voice, that tone, those words. He had heard enough. Jason's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, the room blurred around him. The silverware, the laughter, the lights. It all vanished beneath one boiling truth. This wasn't just a bad manager. This was a man who had crossed a line Jason would never tolerate. And he was about to find out what happens when the owner stops watching and starts acting. Jason didn't move right away. He couldn't. The weight of those words, "People like you should be grateful," echoed in his chest like a slow detonation. He had been in enough rooms, in enough industries to know exactly what kind of man Rick Camden was. The kind that weaponized silence. The kind that chose his victims carefully. The kind that wore a smile when no one was looking, and something far darker when they were alone. He turned slowly, walked back to the bar with purpose stitched into every step, and sat. But his mind was racing. This wasn't a bad night or a single misstep. This was a pattern, and patterns leave evidence. Jason didn't want revenge. He wanted truth. He wanted to expose it, crush it, and rebuild whatever was broken from the inside out. That started with one thing: listening. He scanned the staff. Faces he had seen in photos, interviews, employee reports. Some familiar, some new. All of them had something in common. He saw the same tightness in their smiles, the same fear beneath their eyes, like people trying to survive a storm they were too afraid to name. Cole, the bartender from earlier, returned. "Another water?" he asked. Jason nodded. "Actually, do you know a girl named Samantha? New server?" Cole hesitated, just for a moment, but it was enough. "Yeah," he said slowly. "She's good, polite, quiet." Jason narrowed his eyes. "Quiet?" Cole glanced to the side, lowering his voice. "She keeps her head down. Doesn't cause trouble. Rick doesn't like strong personalities." Jason leaned back in his chair. The picture was getting clearer. "Thanks," he said. "You're doing a good job." Cole blinked. The compliment landed awkwardly. Jason could tell he didn't hear those often. Jason waited until Cole stepped away before rising again. This time, he didn't go to the kitchen. He took a slow walk toward the hallway near the staff locker area. No one stopped him. No one even noticed. He turned a corner and found a man in a pressed white apron organizing silverware at a small prep table. Early 20s. Nervous eyes. Fast hands. Jason stepped close, slow and calm. "You got a second?" The man startled, turning quickly. "Sorry, sir. I didn't see you." Jason smiled. "You're not in trouble. I'm just a regular customer, trying to understand what's happening here." The man swallowed hard. His name tag read Nico. Jason continued. "That server, Samantha. She okay?" Nico froze. And that silence, that's where the real answer lived. He looked around, then leaned in. "She tries to be," he whispered. "But Rick's been on her since day one. Says stuff he shouldn't, makes her close alone, makes her do things no one else has to. And if anyone says anything, well..." Jason tilted his head. "They're gone?" Nico nodded. "Happened to Rachel last month. Spoke up once. 2 days later, she was written up twice for performance issues. Week after that, she quit." Jason clenched his jaw. "And corporate never hears a word," Nico added, voice bitter. "Rick's got friends up top, knows how to cover his tracks." Jason exhaled slowly, anger building in layers. He thanked Nico and moved toward the manager's office. The door was closed. A gold plaque read, "Manager R. Camden." Jason stood still, observing through the small glass window on the side. Inside, Rick sat in front of a monitor, one of the restaurant's security feeds. He clicked rapidly, skipping footage, then paused, and then Jason saw him deleting clips. He wasn't even subtle about it. That's when Jason knew. This wasn't just a man with a superiority complex. This was someone who knew he was protected, who believed the power around him was armor. But power is fragile when it's built on silence. Jason backed away from the door. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a reminder about a meeting the next day. He ignored it. Now he had a plan. Back at the bar, he scribbled something on a napkin and called Cole over. "Would you mind giving this to Samantha after her shift?" Cole looked hesitant. Jason smiled, gentle but firm. "It's not what you think. Just something that might help." Cole read the note quickly, then looked back at Jason. "You're not just a regular customer, are you?" Jason gave a half smile. "I'm someone who believes people like Samantha shouldn't be afraid to come to work." Cole nodded slowly and took the note. Jason left the restaurant minutes later, disappearing into the Los Angeles night without a sound. But he wasn't done. He drove 5 blocks away, parked in a quiet garage, and opened a private folder on his phone. Photos, emails, performance reports. He had access to every piece of data the restaurant had stored over the last 6 months, and something was about to come to light. As he scrolled through the shift schedules, one pattern jumped out immediately. Samantha, always closing, always alone, always on the weekend. He cross-referenced staff complaints, anonymous reports, HR warnings. There it was, a pattern of targeting, a silence too loud to ignore. Then he saw it. A flagged complaint filed by a former employee. Short, but clear. "Manager Camden has created a hostile work environment. Racial comments, unfair treatment. Multiple staff members have left due to his behavior. I won't be next." The complaint had been closed by HR, marked as handled internally. Jason stared at those words. Handled internally. His hands tightened around the phone. No more. Jason's eyes burned as he stared at the final name on the complaint form. Not just a warning, a cry for help that no one answered. Tomorrow night, Rick Camden was planning to fire Samantha under the guise of disciplinary action, but by the time that shift came, he'd be facing someone he never expected, his own boss. Jason wasn't coming back as a customer. He was coming back to confront the rot, face to face. The following night, Jason arrived earlier than usual. The sun hadn't yet set, and the restaurant buzzed in its pre-rush rhythm. Tables being set, candles lit, ice poured into wells behind the bar. The quiet before the storm. It was the perfect time to move without being noticed. He didn't use the front door. Instead, he entered through the back delivery entrance, silent, focused, unnoticed. He knew the layout of his restaurant better than anyone. Every hallway, every staff routine, every blind spot. The night before, he had called someone he trusted, an old colleague from his production team who now worked in cybersecurity. Within hours, Jason had access to the restaurant's internal server and security logs. And what he saw had erased every doubt. Footage missing, edits, data tampered with. This wasn't incompetence. This was cover-up. Jason moved through the side hallway and into the empty event room, a space used for private parties. From there, he had a clear view of the dining floor, the server station, and more importantly, the people who made the place breathe. He saw Samantha. She was prepping menus, focused, still, quiet, but something in her movements gave her away. The stiffness in her shoulders. The way her eyes flicked toward the manager's office every few seconds like she was waiting for the ground to shift beneath her. Rick Camden emerged moments later. Perfectly pressed shirt, expensive cologne, a clipboard in hand that he clutched like a badge of power. He didn't even glance at her, but the air around him shifted when he walked by. Employees tensed, conversations slowed, and Samantha, she stopped breathing for just a moment. Jason moved forward, not into the spotlight, but close enough to see it all unfold. Rick barked something to one of the hosts. The girl nodded quickly and disappeared. Then, like clockwork, he motioned for Samantha to follow him into the back office. She hesitated, then obeyed. Jason waited 3 beats before walking to the server hallway, slipping close enough to hear through the thin office walls. Rick's voice was low, controlled, too polite. "We need to talk about your performance, Samantha." Jason's jaw clenched. He listened. Every word, every condescending phrase, every veiled threat hidden behind corporate speak. "You've been inconsistent. Customers have complained. You don't stay in line. I think it's best if we part ways after tonight. No mention of race. No mention of the after-hours cleaning. No mention of the way she'd been isolated. Just clean, cold manipulation." Samantha didn't argue. She didn't cry. She sat there, silent, nodding, absorbing it like she had already accepted it. Jason had heard enough. He walked back toward the dining area and found Nico, who was preparing drinks at the sidebar. "Do you still have that favor you owe me?" Jason asked quietly. Nico looked up, startled. Then he recognized the fire behind Jason's calm eyes. "Anything," he said without hesitation. Jason pulled out his phone and handed him a recording device. "Plug this into the soundboard. Just for tonight. I need everything." Nico nodded and moved without a word. Jason returned to the floor just in time to see Rick stepping out of the office, looking smug and composed. Samantha followed, face pale but stoic. Her eyes never left the ground. She walked straight to the kitchen. Rick walked straight to the bar. Jason met him halfway. Rick didn't notice him at first, too busy pretending. Jason stopped him with a single word. "Rick." The manager turned, confused. Jason pulled back the hoodie. The recognition hit instantly. His smirk evaporated. "Mr. Statham." Jason didn't smile. He didn't blink. "I think we need to talk." Rick laughed nervously. "Sir, I didn't know you were in town. If I'd known, Jason raised a hand, cutting him off. "Not here. Let's go to the office." The two walked silently through the dining room, a strange quiet following them like fog. A few staff members noticed. Whispers began to form. Inside the office, Jason closed the door and stood silently for a long moment. Rick adjusted his shirt, tried to regain his usual tone. "I assume there's a misunderstanding?" Jason reached into his pocket and pulled out a flash drive. "Play this." Rick hesitated. Jason said nothing. Rick inserted the drive into the office computer. The audio crackled. Samantha's voice came through, shaky, exhausted, recorded from the night before. I'm trying so hard, but he keeps singling me out, making comments, threatening my job. I clean until midnight and he still says I'm lazy." Jason's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "You deleted footage. You edited reports. You've been using this place like your personal kingdom. That ends now." Rick tried to speak. Jason stepped forward. "If you say one word about misunderstandings or miscommunication, I walk out that door and you're not just fired. You're facing legal charges." Rick paled. Jason continued. "Samantha doesn't know what I know yet, but she will. And when she does, she'll know she's safe. And you'll be gone. Rick dropped into the chair, stunned. Jason leaned in, voice low and final. You preyed on her because you thought no one was watching. But I've been watching the whole time. He turned and walked out without another word. The restaurant had grown quieter. Jason moved through the floor, passing employees who now looked at him not as a myth, but as a man standing up for one of their own. Samantha was at the back server station, folding napkins. She looked up when Jason stopped in front of her. For a second, she looked afraid, then confused, then unsure. Jason spoke softly. I know what's been happening. You're not alone anymore. Samantha's hands trembled. She didn't speak, but for the first time in weeks, her shoulders fell an inch, her chest rose a little deeper, her eyes softened. Jason looked around the room, at the staff, the servers, the cooks behind the glass line in the kitchen, and saw it clearly now. Rick Camden wasn't just a threat to Samantha. He was a symbol of something far worse, a system that let silence win. But Jason had already made his next move. He had called corporate, the board, HR, and in less than 24 hours, the entire restaurant would know what happens when the one who built the house finally kicks out the rod inside it. The next day arrived with a quiet tension in the air. Jason stood across the street from the restaurant just after sundown, watching from a distance. Statham's glowed softly beneath the night sky, elegant and composed, outwardly perfect, inwardly bruised. He took a breath, rolled his shoulders, and crossed the street with purpose. This time, he didn't wear a hoodie. He didn't hide. He walked through the front entrance like the man who built it, and every employee turned as if they felt the shift in the air. The hostess stood frozen for a moment before realizing who he was. She stepped back instinctively, but Jason offered a small nod and a smile that eased the fear. He wasn't here for a performance, he was here to set things right. Samantha stood near the back wall of the dining room, clipboard in hand, running through side duties with the precision of someone trying not to be noticed. Jason made his way through the restaurant slowly. Heads turned, whispers stirred, but no one interrupted him. He stopped beside her. She looked up, startled. I told you yesterday, he said softly. You're not alone. Samantha blinked, caught between disbelief and emotion. Jason leaned in just enough. You're not the one who should be worried today. She didn't speak, but the corners of her lips twitched, just a flicker of something that had been gone for a long time. Hope. Jason straightened and turned toward the center of the restaurant. The crowd had thinned. It was the perfect moment. Excuse me, he said clearly. The staff quieted. Rick Camden stepped out from the hallway, clipboard in hand, as if summoned. Jason's eyes found him and didn't flinch. We're going to have a conversation, Jason said. All of us. Rick froze. Jason turned to the team. You've all been working under someone who shouldn't have been allowed to lead. That ends now. Rick stepped forward, trying to interject. Sir, I think we should speak privately. No. Jason cut in. No more privacy. That's how this started. That's how people like you operate, behind closed doors where no one sees the damage you cause. The staff stood in silence, shocked, tense. Jason continued. Samantha has been harassed, targeted, humiliated, and you all saw it. Some of you spoke up. Some of you were afraid. I don't blame you. He turned to Rick. I blame the man who made you feel unsafe. Rick's voice faltered. With all due respect, Mr. Statham. Jason didn't blink. You have no more respect to give. You're done here. He pulled out his phone and pressed a single button. I've spoken with HR, with the board, with legal. You're terminated. Effective immediately. Rick's face lost its color. Jason wasn't finished. You manipulated records. You deleted security footage. You created a culture of fear, and worst of all, you used power to crush the people who trusted this place to protect them. Samantha stood silently, eyes wide. Jason turned to her. Come here. She hesitated, then stepped forward. He faced her gently. "You've held this place together in ways no one saw. You endured more than anyone should, and you deserve to be heard." She opened her mouth, but emotion caught her voice. I didn't want anyone else to feel what I felt," she whispered. "I couldn't afford to quit, but I hated coming here. I hated how small I felt, and I thought maybe this was normal." Jason's voice lowered, warmer. "It's not, and it never will be again." She wiped her eyes quickly, but stood a little taller. Then behind her, Cole stepped forward. Then Nico. Then another server. One by one, they moved toward the center of the room, like a quiet ripple of solidarity. Rick stood alone now, clipboard in hand, shaking slightly. Jason turned to him one last time. "You created fear to build control, but control built on fear always collapses. You're done." Security arrived at the front door, quiet, professional, coordinated by corporate. Rick didn't argue. He walked out slowly, eyes low, dignity crumbling with each step. The doors closed behind him. The restaurant stood still for a moment. Then Jason turned back to the team. "Starting tonight, we're doing things differently. This isn't just a place to work, it's a place to grow, to be safe, to belong." He paused. "I'll be here for the next month, every day, watching, listening, learning. You don't have to be silent anymore." Samantha looked at him, surprised. "You'd stay?" Jason nodded. "I built this, but I let it drift too far. That's on me. I can't fix what I don't see, but now I see it." A hush settled over the room, but this one was different. This silence was full of something new. Relief. Samantha took a breath. "If we speak up now, will anyone actually listen?" Jason met her eyes. "I will." She stared at him for a long moment. And for the first time in months, maybe years, she believed it. An hour later, the restaurant had cleared out. The staff had gathered in the break room, laughing softly, cleaning up together. Samantha was still there, talking with Nico and Cole, her body language lighter, her presence steady. Jason stood outside in the night air, hands in his pockets. He watched them through the window, not as a boss, not as a celebrity, as a man who had seen too much silence, and finally decided to break it. As Samantha walked out that night, her apron folded over her arm, she paused next to Jason. She didn't say much, just a quiet thank you. But in her eyes, Jason saw something that mattered more than applause or recognition. He saw freedom. And somewhere deep inside, he knew this wasn't the last restaurant where someone was suffering in silence. It was just the first one, where someone finally said, "Not here, not anymore." In that moment, the silence was finally broken. Samantha wasn't just another employee. She became the reason a toxic system was finally exposed. And Jason? He didn't just fire a manager, he lit a fire for change. But how many more restaurants, how many more people are still afraid to speak up? Tell us in the comments. Have you ever seen someone get mistreated at work? What did you do? Subscribe to this channel if you believe in stories that stand for something. Like this video to help it reach more people who need to see it. And don't forget to share it with someone who needs a reminder. Even the quietest voices matter.